Rachel.
Hey, Brittany.
So have you ever heard the phrase, justice is blind?
Oh, yes.
You've heard that before.
Yeah.
I think we throw it around a lot, right? But what does it really mean? And that's what I want to talk about today, because I think there's a really interesting lesson here. Because there's something, well, we'll get into that. I want to start with just digging into this phrase first. So when we say justice is blind, what we mean in the context of like the legal system, like let's say the government comes after you for something. Hopefully you didn't commit a crime. But of course, we've talked about in other shows how now every American is a criminal because of all the, you can set up a lemonade stand without a permit and you could be a criminal. So everybody is an accidental.
There's a book called 3 Felonies a Day out there.
Yes, that's a great one. So funny.
Yikes.
But for justice is blind, it means that when you find yourself up against the government and maybe you did something wrong, you're accused of something, that blind meaning that you're not going to be judged on anything but what you did, right? There's not going to be a bias against you, which is like an idea you already have in your head, maybe that something is wrong. And so they'd automatically say, no, you're wrong. Or maybe they say, Rachel, I don't like women who wear green shirts. And I see that you're wearing a green shirt today. Guilty. And that's a silly example, right? But it's that kind of thing, because the law is supposed to be there's supposed to be objective truth, right? We're not judging based on, well, I like this person. Well, this person's rich. This person's connected. No, it's did you do something wrong or not? And that's because that's how we live under the rule of law. The law is king, so to speak, which is funny because it's kind of against having a king. But the law is king, and we are all operating under that. Now, that's why you'll see there's Lady Justice, and that's a symbol, a woman you will see carved in a lot of old buildings in DC, and you'll notice sometimes she's blindfolded, and that's playing on that phrase, justice is blind. So that is how things used to be. That is how things were intended to be. But these days there's this new kind of justice being pushed in not only our legal systems, but what I think is worse is that it's happening in schools. And I want to talk specifically about what's happening in schools today. And that's called restorative justice. And Rachel, one thing that I always do, and I think you'll like this because I think you like words like I do. So every time we have a word, I try to see if we can figure it out without having to just say what it is. So when we look at the word restore, there's that prefix re in there. And re is when you do something again, right? Redo, re-enter. What's another one, Rachel? Can you think of any?
Repeat.
Rewind. That's a good one. Rewind. I don't think people rewind anymore, right?
I said remind.
Oh, I thought you said it. I'm like, rewind. I'm like, do kids even know what rewind means? Back in our day, when you watched
Blockbuster.
when you watched a videotape or listened to a cassette,
rewind.
You'd have to rewind it. Or if there was a song you liked at the beginning of a cassette, you had to like rewind it all the
Let's
way
not
back.
date ourselves.
So it means to do again. So when we're talking about restorative justice, restore would mean like to make whole or to heal, something like that. And in this case, when you hear schools talk about restorative justice, what they're talking about is treating people differently because of something that a group they just happen to belong to went through a long time ago. So there's this word systemic. We like to talk, well, not we, but systemic racism, that our whole system is racist and it's always been racist. And because of that, we have to go back and make up for things that you and I didn't do, Rachel. But for things that maybe, slavery, things that we were not around for, but we have to make up for it now by this restorative justice. So that means treating people differently and punishing them differently based on the color of their skin or maybe their gender. And I don't know, Rachel, have you heard of this term before?
I have heard of this term before. And it seems like it's the opposite of justice being blind.
It is the exact opposite. It's justice with its eyes wide open and peeping all around. And so the way this plays out in schools, let's say that you have a fight at school. And let's say there's two people or one person started the fight, just started pushing you and it gets violent, which I hope never happens. That's very scary. Let's say something like that happens. but because of the race or maybe the gender or the background of the person who did the fighting, instead of saying, you know what, you're suspended from school or some sort of punishment, they would say, you know what, because you come from a group that has been, sometimes they say marginalized is the word. I don't know why I said that in quotes, but that is the word, marginalized. When you've been from a group that's been marginalized or had, didn't have as many rights as they have today, that we're going to say we're sorry for that by making sure you don't get in trouble today. Because they say it's because you had that treatment and your ancestors had that treatment that you're like this today. It's why you haven't had the opportunities that somebody else had. So we need to just make sure that you sit down and you apologize to the person, but nothing's going to happen to you. And this is a problem because, again, but we could get into a bigger issue of public schools punishing kids. That's a whole other issue. But if you are on school, it's a whole other issue, and somebody is violent or someone does something wrong, as a society, even if it's school or not, there's consequences to that. If every time I saw Rachel, I pushed her down, Rachel and I probably would not be sitting here doing this podcast right now, because she would have been like, no, you're mean. I don't want to do this. So there's those consequences of, I hate to say the word shunning from society, but kind of people who don't treat other people correctly and that don't really fit into that world. But if we're letting people get away with it because we don't want to hurt their feelings, because we're judging them based on a group that they belong to, and something bad that happened to that group before any of us were even born. How do you feel about that, Rachel?
Well, I think it's kind of an insult to all the progress we actually have made in civil rights throughout history, and also ignores the fact that just about everyone's been oppressed at some time. If you think about the Irish when they came over to the United States,
People
how badly
did not like
they
the
were.
Irish.
No, I mean they were also enslaved and they had a lot of hardships, and it's not only one group of people that have had really tragic histories, and it's not to ignore that any of that happened, but
it's terrible that it's happened. Slavery was horrible.
Yeah, I mean, and there's no apologizing for it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't acknowledge all the progress we've made today. And if you don't see that, get your eyes checked. Yeah, I mean, and think about, I mean, everybody's been oppressed. Everybody's been oppressed at some point in time. I believe it wasn't until like as early as the 70s. I was born in 75, not to date myself, but there you go. But in that era, it was just becoming the case that women could have a checking account.
A credit card, names on a credit card even, right?
Yeah, without a male cosigner, and to me, that seems like relatively recent history that women they did not have equal rights. But that's all changed. Do I want any special favors for being a woman now? No, I just want an equal playing ground. And that's why justice being blind is the very best way to operate, because it shouldn't matter what you look like, the color of your skin, your gender. It shouldn't matter. Everybody should be treated as a human, because we're all human beings, and that's what's important.
And rules should be applied evenly. It doesn't matter what your race is or any other factor, or what your religion is. Maybe if you hurt someone at school or wherever it may be, you shouldn't be given a pass or maybe punished harsher just because. And I had a friend here in DC where I live who the parents had to have a meeting at school because restorative justice was becoming a thing. And she was kind of outspoken, saying like, this doesn't seem fair. Why is my kid getting sent home all the time for like disrupting the class? And this kid is starting fights and we don't want to, and so it's an issue that is just, it's coming up too often these days. I kind of feel like we're maybe heading towards a different, like maybe things are getting better.
I think so. I think the pendulum is swinging back. I notice a lot in history and culture. It's like there's a pendulum swing. We go from one extreme, that's like the thesis, and then we overcorrect. And
that's the thesis? That's a big word.
Thesis, that's in this context, it's the way things are.
Okay.
The way things are is one way and it's not right. And then so to correct, we swing back to another extreme, the antithesis, the opposite, too much.
That's another good root, or the word prefix. Because I live antithesis, yeah. Anti.
Yeah. And then a lot of times then you will notice that we settle in a happy medium, which is the synthesis. So I feel like the thesis was like slavery and oppression and lack of human rights. And then the antithesis is like the restorative justice and all of this stuff, which is chaos and it's not fair. And a lot of people have a problem with it. And it's not the right solution. Just because it introduces all that unfairness. Mm-hmm. And then now we're coming back to synthesis, which is where we have human rights and fairness. That's what I see happening. I hope I'm right. Remains to be seen.
I have a grimmer outlook. I hope you're right.
Boy.
I'm worried that instead of race, which is happening now, or we're getting out of it, that now it's going to become class warfare. I have a feeling, and that's where you're going to see a lot more of these dangers of communism and Marxism coming into play, which we've talked about a lot, because I'm noticing a lot of people are shifting away from the everything should be about race, everybody's racist, to now it's everybody is, class warfare. I was born poorer than you, and so you need to give me some of your money, and Elon Musk makes too much money, and Jeff Bezos is too rich. And, there's this expression like eat the rich, which is basically like kind of destroy the rich. I'm noticing that mentality coming more. And so I'm wondering if this stuff is going to switch to being about money and economics and how you grew up and what they call class warfare. Which isn't really war. It's just like there's classes in society, tension between the rich.
Tension and resentment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That, you'll see that all throughout history. Like, every time, place, and culture has an element of class warfare and different ways that they deal with it and different problems that it causes. I'll bring up property rights again. It's another reason that property rights are so essential. If you work for it, it should be yours. You should get to keep it, and no one should have the right to take it away. Yep. Now, if you get it through force or fraud, that's another story. But yeah. Humans are just so full of drama, Brittany.
Yes,
so
we
much
are.
drama.
Yes, we absolutely are. That's why it's always funny to me in Greek mythology. There was Zeus and all the gods that are main players in Greek mythology, and the humans always assumed that, or maybe the gods said this, that they created humans for their own entertainment because the humans were always so dramatic that it was like a TV show for them because they were like
a soap opera.
What are they going to do today? So that's funny. But we will wrap it up there because we've gotten far off topic, but that's the joy of these conversations. Who knows where we're going to go? So
who knows?
Who knows? Thank you, Rachel, for talking with us today. And I think just a closing thought is remember that our entire, not just legal system, but our country was founded on the belief that everyone should be treated equally no matter who they are or where they came from. And we weren't always great at that. Slavery was not abolished until the 1800s. But that is the spirit of our Constitution and of this country, is that justice should be blind. So keep that in mind. We hope this sparks good conversation at your dinner tables and in your households. So please don't forget to like and subscribe and share the podcast with your friends. And until next time, Rachel, we will talk to you later.
Until next time, bye-bye.